that part of prophecy has occurred already.
That God says it as an eternal promise as well. So it actually, Paul even calls it an eternal promise in the New Testament, just FYI. Have you ever read the book of Romans?
Yeah, I've read.
Okay, so you should already know this, by the way.
He doesn't say it's an eternal kingdom.
He does, actually.
Like,
he
doesn't
says
say that the Jewish nation, ethno-state, is an eternal kingdom.
Well, first off, nobody calls it an ethno-state because the concept of a nation-state didn't exist until the French Revolution. So no shit does Paul not say it's an ethno-state. He says in the book of Romans, the Jews are enemies to the Gospels for your sake, but they are loved for the sake of the patriarchs. And he says, first to the Jew, then to the Greeks. And he specifically says, for God's promises and gifts are eternal or cannot be revoked. You should just believe me, because I'm like, what do you think? I'm making the words up as I'm reading it? Verse 3, for days are coming, declares the Lord.
Accept your interpretation, exactly.
It's not, first off, I haven't even given an interpretation. I'm reading it. That has nothing to do with interpretation. So I'm going to read it again. For days are coming, declares the Lord, when I will restore the fortunes of my people, Israel and Judah, said the Lord, and I will bring them back to the land that I gave their fathers, and they shall possess it. That is verse 3 in its entirety.
Okay, my man.
And there's actually other verses I haven't brought up. Because again, I've read the Bible. I know there's multiple times it says it. In fact, it says it a lot. It's like kind of insane why you're even like arguing against this part. Like, there's some things you can argue against. Everyone, Christian, Jew, everyone understands these verses. But again, if you want to go to Isaiah 11,
like without looking at because again, I accept my own flaw, man. I'm not saying you're lying. It's yes, they do come back to the land. They come back from Babylon. You agree, right?
Well, it's not
they
just
do return.
I do agree with that statement, but it's not just that. God says it as an eternal promise as well, and he says that in Numbers, he says that in Jeremiah, and
there
might be other
eternal promise. I don't deny
that
they do return.
Genesis. Okay, I'll find the verse for you. Can you go to why I look for it?
We don't disagree that they do return, but I would say yes, that part of prophecy has occurred already.
So it actually, Paul even calls it an eternal promise in the New Testament, just FYI, when Paul says it in the book of Romans. Okay, again, I'll find the verses for you, but can you let me speak, dude? Like,
sure,
you're just like not letting me speak. Well, you kind of are, though. And you maybe not trying to be, but you're being a little rough right now. It's just calm down. Anyways, so Paul, have you ever read the book of Romans?
Yeah, I've read.
Okay, so you should already know this, by the way. Like, the fact that you don't know, I'm not saying you should know the exact verse.
He doesn't say it's an eternal kingdom.
He does, actually. Like, he
doesn't say that the Jewish nation, ethno-state, is an eternal kingdom.
Well, first off, nobody said anything about, okay, once again, you have to relax a bit. Okay, so nobody calls it an ethno-state because the concept of a nation-state didn't exist until the French Revolution. So no shit does Paul not say it's an ethno-state. But that's not what we're arguing right now, and it is actually a bloodline, and Paul says it specifically. He does. He says in the book of Romans, the Jews are enemies to the Gospels for your sake, but they are loved for the sake of the patriarchs. And he says, first to the Jew, then to the Greeks. And he specifically says, for God's promises and gifts are eternal or cannot be revoked. He literally says this in the book of Romans, and you should know this as a Christian. I'm not even Christian. I shouldn't be teaching you this.
Yeah, my man. But Paul,
do you agree with me? Paul says that.
Okay, which verse does he say that? I agree, but which verses?
Can you do me a favor while I look for the other verse I need to find for you? Can you do me a favor? Just go look it for yourself. Just type those words into Google. I promise you'll find the verses very quickly. That way we can split each other's, well, not each other's homework, just your homework.
What's the verbatim quote then, man? I'll look it up myself.
Again, I'm sure it's not perfectly verbatim, but you don't need to be verbatim to find it on Google. You know how Google works.
Okay,
you look like an adult. You are an adult, yes?
Well, yes, my friend. I'm only asking.
So just type in Book of Romans and type in Paul says God's gifts and promises are or cannot be revoked. Just type that in. It might not be perfectly verbatim, but I promise you you'll find it. And then I will find where God calls the covenant eternal.
Okay, 11:29. We'll go to 11:29.
At what point are we gonna like get to a conversation? I feel like I'm just doing like I'm just teaching you a lot of stuff right now. It's kind of boring for me.
Well, you're throwing a lot of stuff. So
I'm just answering your
11,
questions again. Anyways, to answer the question about the covenant with
11:29.
Abraham, one sec. The covenant with Abraham for the Jews being everlasting and permanent is found in Genesis 17, 7 through 8, Genesis 13, 15, Genesis 26, 3 through 4, Exodus 31, 16 through 17, Leviticus 26, 44 through 45, Deuteronomy 7 through 9, Samuel 7 through 12, 12 through 16, Psalm 89, 28 through 29, Jeremiah 31, 35 through 37, Chronicles 16, 15 through 18, Psalm 105, 8 through 11. So like I said, a lot of verses, which is why when you ask me, where does it say it? It's like, dude, I don't have all of those memorized.
Yeah, and a lot of those are talking about either historical returning of the Jews or the Jews
No,
returning to the church.
you're mixing things up. It's actually talking about the covenant being everlasting and permanent or forever. You said that never says that. I just showed you
And
where it
that
says
no,
it multiple
that's
times.
no, the covenant of they have to return to the land.
Well, no,
That covenant isn't forever.
Actually, it is. It specifically
And
says
where
it in
does it say that?
Genesis. Yeah. Okay. Again, the covenant specifically stated, and I'm sure you agree with this. If you've read the Bible, which I assume you've had, he says that you can be punished if you do not follow my laws, but I will always, if you come back to me, will return you from the four corners of the world into your land. And that's part of the covenant. The covenant was attached to the land.
If you return to me.
Correct. So real quick, do you agree
Right.
that, can you just do me a favor? Just let me finish a sentence, okay? Do you agree that the covenant was attached to the land?
In the Old Testament, yes, it was connected.
Okay, great. Do you agree in the Old Testament that God says that the covenant will go away when the sun and the stars extinguish?
It's like when like heaven and earth are done away with.
I'm not asking you to change the words of God. He doesn't say that. He said the suns and the stars extinguish. Do you agree he says that?
Again, man, I mean, you may not like it when I say, well, what verse are you quoting there?
Okay, I'll find that for you as well. I'll find that for you as well. No problem. I've been right this entire time, and you're still not believing me. Hold on. Before we keep going, I have to find. Stop. I have to find this new verse before we keep going, because I've already found like 30 verses for you. So let me find this new one. Where does God say that the covenant with the Jews will last until the sun and the stars extinguish? So it's Jeremiah chapter 31, 35 through 37. Are you even here anymore?
Yeah, bro. I'm listening.
Okay,
I'm
great.
reading. I'm reading here, bro.
All
I'm
right.
trying to work with you here.
Is this like Nick teaching?
No, because I mean, you can think you're teaching me, but these
clearly
verses that
teaching
talk
you.
about them returning to the
Clearly
land,
teaching
that
you.
is talking about when they come home from Babylon, and that's been completed already. When it talks about how the covenant will never go away, in the New Testament, the Jews still keep to the old covenant laws, and the people that return to Israel, it's talking about the church, bro.
Yeah, so that's not true, and Paul actually makes it very clear. So here we go. Thus said the Lord, who established the sun for light by day, the laws of moon and stars for light by night, who stirs up the sea into roaring waves, whose name is Lord of hosts. If these laws should ever be annulled by me, declares the Lord, only then will the offspring of Israel cease to be a nation before me for all time. Thus said the Lord, if the heavens above could be measured, which is what you were talking about, and the foundation of the earth below could be fathomed, only then would I reject all the offspring of Israel for all that they have done, declares the Lord. So it's both. The one before that is talking about the sun, and I didn't even say the moon, I said just the stars. The sun, the moon, and the stars. And what stirs up the sea into roaring waves. So this is in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 35.
Yeah, chapter 35.
Genesis also says it. I'm going to go find that verse. I know it's in chapter 58. Also, Paul says it, like I said.
So you're making, so your point basically is
not
that
58, that's not right. It's
you're saying Jesus didn't fulfill these prophecies because Israel hasn't been returned to as a nation. They haven't returned to the Father and returned to the land.
Again, I'm not making any particular claims right now. I'm just answering the things that you're getting.
You're saying when the Bible says that the Jews will return to Israel, that's talking about more than just returning to Babylon.
Yeah, again, that's correct. He says it's forever, and he specifically talks about this. But nonetheless,
And
Paul...
we don't disagree with that, man.
Okay, great. So I don't know why you're arguing.
We don't agree with you that it's the physical land. That's not what it's about. It's about the Israel of the church.
Yeah, okay, so Paul specifically splits spiritual Israel from ethnic Israel. In Romans, the one that I gave you earlier, he specifically is talking about ethnic Israel, not spiritual Israel. Yes, Christians believe in spiritual Israel. Some Christians believe that's the church, right? I assume, are you Catholic?
I'm Orthodox.
Okay, close. So I'm a cradle Catholic. I left the church and no longer a Christian. That being said, I know where the concept comes from. What Paul specifically says is there is a split between spiritual Israel, which is one thing, and ethnic Israel, because in chapter, I believe it's 11, you can look, Romans chapter 11, he specifically says, did God forsake his people? Talking about ethnic Israel, and he said no. And then there's spiritual Israel, which as an Orthodox Christian would be the church. There is a clear separation that Paul makes very, very clear in the book of Romans, which I'm starting to feel like you've never read.
No, because you are reading parts of Romans, but not other parts.
So I've read all of Romans. I've read the entire Bible multiple times. Sure, I have no problem, but it still shows that I'm right, that there is still a thing about spiritual Israel versus ethnic Israel. I didn't. So of course, we can talk about other things.
Chapter 11, talking about this. So this part here, chapter 11, verse 19, it says, "You will say then, branches were broken off that I might be grafted in." You know this part, right?
Yes, of course.
So here, and as well in when Jesus was talking about the parable of the vineyard, clearly he's saying these people have been grafted out and you've been grafted in.
No, and it doesn't say anything. In fact, if you keep reading, it specifically says that the roots were there. So actually, you're wrong. It doesn't say anything about grafting.
So it says otherwise. So therefore, consider the goodness and the severity of God on those who fell. Severity, but towards you goodness. If you continue in his goodness, otherwise you will also be cut off. So he's saying the Jews that don't follow the God of Israel have been cut off, right?
Well, no, it's specifically that don't believe in the Messiah. Okay, hold on. I'm trying to answer you, dude. Don't ask me a question and then stop me after 3 words. Okay, so it's talking about from the Christian point of view to not to those that do not believe in the Messiah. That is true, and that is a Christian point of view, and it should be a Christian point of view.
No,
that being said, can you answer me a question? What did Paul mean when he said Jews are enemies to the Gospels for your sake? What did he mean by that?
So I will answer that, but first I don't want you to run away from what I'm bringing up here, because I've entertained a lot of what you brought up.
Nobody's running away.
And I'll talk about it, bro. And I will talk about it, bro. But the Jews were cut. The Jews that do not believe in Jesus were cut off, right? They were grafted out.
Yeah, again, that's not true, but it's fine.
Branches were broken off that I might be grafted in. Well said. Because of unbelief, they were broken off and cast out. And you stand by faith, right? Mm-hmm. So these Jews that don't believe in the God of Israel were grafted out and cut off, and the Gentiles were grafted in, right?
Yeah, again, we can answer this if you just answer my question. This was supposed to happen. So this was supposed to happen. Right. I'm trying to tell you, and you're not answering my question, which is related. What did Paul mean when he said that Jews are enemies to the Gospels for your sake? Why did he say for your sake? What does that mean? You know, that's a good question, man. What were you reading right now? Roman what?
That was Romans 11, verse 19. So, and you're talking about...
Well, really quick, before we move away, if you don't know, go look it up, and while I read Romans 11, chapter 11, verse 19, go look that up to see what he meant by that.
You're talking about chapter 28 to 32.
I think it's a lot smaller than that, but yes, sure. It was one verse, but sure. So anyways, so chapter 19.
What Paul's saying is that they have not been cut off because of God's mercy. Okay, all in Israel will be saved.
You're not answering my question.
But it's through the Messiah. It's through Christ. It's not through their bloodline.
No, I agree. Christians believe that Jews and everyone will follow
No,
Christ. Every knee will
my
bend and
friends,
every tongue
no.
will. Okay, so you're wrong,
Paul,
actually. Okay.
Paul is saying that's why I brought up the
You
grafting
didn't
because he
answer my
says
question. You didn't answer my
you
question.
won't let
What did
me.
Paul mean when he said for your sake? That's the part I'm asking. Why was it for your sake? What does that mean?
So, as far as I'm understanding, is that that has to do with them being a light to the Gentiles. They, in their arrogance, have suffered this disobedience of God,
It's
and
not answering my
them through
question.
their struggling
This
has
doesn't answer my
saved
question.
us.
This
They've
doesn't
saved the Gentiles. That's how.
right. How?
They're the
How does
God of
they how does
Israel,
that doing that save the Gentiles? No, not the God of Israel, the Jews. It says the Jews
because the
did it for your sake.
prophecies
Why?
say that they will deny the Messiah.
Well, first off, prophecies don't say that actually, but
Yes, they
nonetheless,
do. They say they will deny him.
okay, great. It doesn't. But my question to you is, how did the Jews do that for your sake? What does that mean? What would have happened if Jews
Again,
didn't
it's
desire?
because we are being saved through the God of Israel.
Okay, but it says the Jews did it for your sake. So if the Jews didn't deny the Messiah,
It
why would
says
it be bad for
this.
the Gentile? Okay, just let me finish
So
the
it's
question so you can answer the question properly because you keep
okay,
trying to
bud.
answer halfway through the question and that's why you keep fucking up. My question is
Yes, sir.
why did it say Jews did this for your sake? What would have happened if Jews accepted the Messiah right away? What would have happened? Would it have been bad for the Gentiles?
I mean, that's a wonderful question, and
And
I'll
it's
admit
answered.
that I don't have the answer to you
That's
on
perfect.
that.
You could have said that 20 minutes ago and we could have saved a
No,
lot of
I mean,
time.
but that's not
So I'm gonna answer.
that has nothing to do with the
It
fact
does.
that the
It
Jews were
does.
grafted
I got
out.
it. So if you just keep reading after grafted out, you would actually have answered your own question. So
And
let's
I'm gonna,
keep
if you would
reading.
let me, bro, for all the talk of
So
interruption, I
I
can't
understand.
get through it.
Okay, first off, you've been speaking significantly more. So let's keep reading after
Incorrect.
Romans. Okay, that's great. So let's
Incorrect,
keep
dog.
reading after Romans. You will say then branches were broken off so that I could be grafted in. Granted, but they were broken off because of unbelief, and you stand by faith. Do not be arrogant, but tremble, for if God did not spare the natural branches, he will not spare you either. And that's where you stopped.
Who did
Wait,
it? So no, you
Okay, I'm
stopped
going to
me.
mute you because we're going to keep reading, okay? Because this is important. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God, sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you, and he ran away. All right. I'm going to keep reading because this guy,
Wait.
kind of fucked it up anyways, and this is what he did on purpose. Consider therefore the kindness and sternness of God, sternness to those who fell, but kindness to you, provided that you continue in his kindness. Otherwise you also will be cut off. And if they do not persist in unbelief, they will be grafted in, for God is able to graft them in again. He didn't want to read that part, okay? Anyways, after all, if you were cut out of an olive tree that is wild by nature and contrary to nature, were grafted into a cultivated olive tree, how much more readily will these, the natural branches, be grafted into their own olive tree? See, it's funny how he didn't want to read that part, okay? And then if you keep going, it says what? I do not want you to be ignorant of this mystery, brothers and sisters, so that you may not be conceited. Israel has experienced a hardening in part until the full number of the Gentiles has come in, and in this way all of Israel will be saved, as it is written. Now, this is talking about ethnic Israel and spiritual Israel. Now, I want to make it clear, again, I'm no longer a Christian. I don't believe this, but we have to argue from the Christian point of view. It first needs to be not some Gentiles. It says the full number of Gentiles has come in. And until that happens, there is a hardening on ethnic Israel. It's obviously not saying spiritual Israel is hardening, because that doesn't make sense. If they were hardening, why would they all be grafted in? That's the part he didn't want to read. That's why he kept cutting me off. That's what it says. If you keep reading, again, I don't particularly believe this, but if you're a Christian, that's what you should believe. That Jews are not going to accept Jesus because they have a hardening, right, from, I guess, God. And that's going to stay in put until, just one more time so we really get it. Israel has experienced a hardening in part, the part being ethnic Israel, until the full number of the Gentiles, as in not ethnic Israel, this would be spiritual Israel, has come in. And in this way, all of Israel will be saved. As it is written, the deliverer will come from Zion. He will turn godlessness away from Jacob. And this is my covenant with them when I take away their sins. And then it says, as far as the Gospels, this is the part that I was reading, that he kind of read. As far as the gospel is concerned, they, the Jews, are enemies for your sake. But as far as election is concerned, they are loved on account of the patriarchs. For God's gifts and his call are irrevocable. Just one more time. Irrevocable. Just as you, who were at one time disobedient to God, have now received mercy as a result of their disobedience. So they too have now become disobedient in order that they too may now receive mercy as a result of God's mercy to you. For God has bound everyone over to disobedience so that he may have mercy on them all. It's literally talking about ethnic Israel. Clearly, it couldn't be talking about spiritual Israel. Well, it's talking about both actually in the entire thing that I read, but it talks about the hardening. That's talking about ethnic Israel, and talks about the enemies to the gospel. That's talking about ethnic Israel. Obviously, because if it was talking about spiritual Israel, then it would be saying that Christians are enemies to the gospel, which would make obviously no sense whatsoever. That's what I was trying to get him to, but he really didn't want to. You have to put all of Paul's words together. Sorry for the long rant, but I wanted to make sure that was very clear. You have to put all of Paul's words together. You can't just be like, oh, it says they're grafted out. See, it says they're grafted out. Yeah, what does it say right after that? That they are being disobedient, they have a hardening, they will be grafted back in from the mercy of God, just as God gave mercy to those that were disobedient before them. That's what it's saying. And it has to go to all Gentiles before all of Israel will be saved. Anyways.